Welcome back to the channel, everybody, and today it is my Week 17 Power Rankings video. We've seen some teams sort of move around a bit. The playoffs are getting more determined, and I got a new number one team after a couple weeks of me saying that I was tempted to put them number one. So for those of you that have been here before, you might know that might be a spoiler alert for you guys, but make sure to hit the like and the subscribe on this video. It is the easiest, freest, and quickest way you can support my channel and its growth. So please go ahead and do that right now, and then we will get to the video and the content now. And as always, we go 8 by 8, and I'm going to start with Houston. They are still the last place team for me, but man, oh man, I put them over last week for the way that they've been playing the last couple weeks, really playing hard, and there are some guys on this roster that are going to have jobs somewhere else next year for sure. They're going to be those character locker room hires, the guys that you want on that roster, those depth guys who are going to be, egoless, who are going to go out there and give you everything no matter what the assignment is. It's really amazing, even though they've only won just the one game out of the last three, and they've only won 2 games all year. The last 3 weeks, it's been amazing to see their character of those players, the coaching staff, all the above. So, there's a lot of good things going to be coming for Houston eventually. It's just going to be a bit of a process. But a team doing the exact opposite of that is Denver. Denver is so bad. The only reason I put Denver over Houston is just because the quality of the players on the roster is so much better in Denver. Houston doesn't really have anyone the way Denver has, especially on the defensive side of the ball. The Colts, they move up one just because of Denver stinking out the joint completely. The Colts, that game they played Monday night against the Chargers, they really let the Chargers off the hook. The Chargers, really let them off the hook quite a bit. That game could have easily been a complete blowout, but for some reason the Chargers offense just really struggled to get things going and to stay consistent. Cardinals and Bears don't really move, kind of are what they are. I dropped down the Falcons. They're starting to, don't love them. I think they are the worst team in that division. It's the way it's worked out. And Carolina, I bumped them up one. They surprisingly have a real opportunity to win the division next week. If they beat the Bucks, they jump into first place in that division, and then they just need to match whatever the Bucks do in the final week of the season. So that's going to be one heck of a game, and Carolina could catch them. The Bucks are not that great, and they're playing really good for Steve Wilkes, who might be playing his way into being the head coach next year. I mean, I don't know if that's necessarily the best idea for Carolina, because you might want to try to lure in a big-time head coach, like with an offensive mind probably, because you're likely going to be getting one of the rookie quarterbacks coming up, or you're going to have Matt Corral, but you're going to want to have somebody in there that you can build up a young quarterback with. So I don't know if keeping Steve Wilkes in that role is necessarily the best idea, but Steve Wilkes could play himself into maybe being a candidate for another team in this upcoming offseason. The Saints, I'm not moving them. I do think that they are the second best team in the division. I just think that it's just not clicking for them the way that it's supposed to. And for me, it's because I say it every week. They're the worst coach team in the NFL, and everyone judged me for saying that in my original power ranking series. They're like, oh, it's the same defensive guy and the offensive guy that was calling the plays when Peyton was there, and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, you guys really need to get a grip on what a game planning and how the delegation of a head coach works, and the stuff that Sean Payton was doing, that just because he wasn't calling the plays in the game, he was setting up the if-then scenarios. He was setting up the overall game plan. He was vetoing certain play calls. He was recommending certain play calls in certain situations that they were running. That's where they saw a lot of their success. So it's all coming back to bite them in the butt the way that I said it would, and your apologies are accepted. Going here at the next 8, I moved the Rams up 2 spots. They're starting to get it going a bit with some competency at the quarterback position with Baker Mayfield, who seems to be... Sean McVay seems to know how to use him properly, knows what plays to call in what situations for him to keep him comfortable. And, I mean... And they mopped the floor with the Broncos, who are just so terrible. Didn't want to move the Rams up too much because I still think that all these 23 teams would probably beat them in most scenarios. I didn't move the Bucs or the Raiders. The Bucs, I didn't move them because even though they won, it was very unimpressive and uninspiring against the Arizona Cardinals. And they're really clinging on to hope because there's 3 teams in their division that are somehow playing worse than they are. The Raiders stay where they are. That game was... It's hard to judge in a game where it's that cold. Anything can happen in those types of games. The weather, that type of weather really does even out the playing field a lot more than I think people give credit for. But I still think that the Raiders are severely underachieving, and they need to figure out something in this offseason to get them over the hump. I switched the Steelers and the Browns. The Browns, what the hell was that? What the hell was that game with the Saints? How are you going to blow that game? Though it does make me happy because, they got Deshaun Watson, and I'm happy for their suffering. And the Steelers I put ahead of them just because I think the Steelers are just a tougher team physically and mentally than the Browns. So if it came down to it, I would have more faith in the Steelers winning that game than the Browns winning it for sure. The Titans, I finally give them the tumble that they probably deserved. Drop them down 5 spots. They're on one hell of a losing skid right now, and I think that there's no turning it around. This has been Vrabel's worst year as the coach, obviously. I hate to say that I told you so, but I did tell you so. I think I had the Titans down for 8 wins this year. 7 or 8 wins in my original Power Rankings video, so they're definitely a team that I called properly. And it's for all the reasons that I anticipated, is that the offensive line is not as great as it needs to be. They don't have the weapons outside of Derrick Henry to then complement a play-action pass system. They don't have the edge rushers to properly get after the quarterback the way that they need to. And some of that was Harold Landry getting injured. I understand that. So it's just... all those things are coming back to bite the Titans. So I expect them in this offseason to invest in that offensive line. Taylor Lewan's probably going to get cut. So that first pick in the first round is very likely, and at least it should be, one of those offensive tackles. With them dropping down, I move up the Jets and the Patriots. They just moved up, not particularly because they were any type of impressive or anything. They kind of showed what they were, but the Titans dropping them down like that does, by default, move those 2 teams up. Getting into the next day, another team kind of like the Titans is the Seattle Seahawks. I'm bumping them down 4 spots. They are sort of settling into being a middle-of-the-pack team that has overachieved all year. And I think that I think it really shows in these situations where it's late in the year. They weren't really that talented. They were overachieving. Teams were maybe taking them lightly. They were catching teams. And now this last half of the season, teams have taken Seattle a lot more seriously, probably as seriously as they should have at the beginning of the year. And now it's starting to sort of settle in with them being hit and miss every week. I didn't move Washington. They played the 49ers. It's hard to punish them for not beating the Niners. So I feel it was fair to keep them where they're at. Jacksonville continues to impress. I think they got that division in the bag now. Titans are just ice cold. And the Jags control their own destiny. I think they're going to be able to close this out. Dolphins, I bump them down 2 spots. Another loss for them. I still think they're a good team. I still think that they're capable of winning games. Tua is in concussion protocol again, and I'm just going to have to put out there, is this the last time we've seen Tua play? 3 concussions in 4 months? Is it? 3 concussions in 4 months? is not great. It's not great at all, especially that second one. That was terrifyingly scary. And for him to be in protocol again, like how much money is too much money? How much money do you need? You know, his contract was millions of dollars when he signed it as the number 5 overall pick in the draft. I just I don't I wouldn't play. I wouldn't play again. I know it's got to be hard to walk away, especially when now you're in a situation on a team where it seems to finally be clicking for you on all cylinders, but at what point is your long-term health more important than football? Like, that's crazy. It's just crazy to me to prioritize a sport over long-term health, over really anything. Like, there's nothing more important than your own health, your ability to be there for your family mentally and physically into your latter years than it is when you're in your mid-20s and being like, oh, maybe we'll make the playoffs and people will cheer and analysts will clap for me. Like, it's just so ridiculous. So it probably won't be, but it probably should be the last time we've seen Tua play. But with that said, I don't think they fall out of the upper half of the league in terms of team quality because they lose him. I do think that they're out of being a contender for sure. But I still think they're not a team that anyone wants to be playing because, they still have Tyreek, you still have Waddle, you still got guys on the defense that can make plays. I moved Green Bay up 4. They're getting hot. It might be too little too late. It might be too little too late for them. But it seems like everything's clicking now. They figured it out. And, man, it's a shame that it's likely too little too late for them. They might put themselves in too much of a hole, especially with Minnesota and Detroit still left on their schedule. This might be just a little too much for Green Bay to overcome. Detroit, I dropped them down 2. You can't get beat like that by Carolina. I know I praised Carolina when I talked about them in this video, but by no means should you be getting beaten like that by a team like the Panthers. My New York Giants, up 3 spots, back to being a top 10 team, despite their loss to Minnesota. They played a good game against Minnesota. They obviously stayed in it the whole way, lost as time expired to a 61-yard field goal, which, I mean, hey, it's a painful way to lose, but it's not like you got your butt handed to you or anything like that. Some drop balls by Richie James, who by just necessity is the number 1 receiver somehow on a team. And the Giants probably would have been able to close that game out and had the lead going into that last drive, rather than it being a tie and Minnesota sort of being able to dictate the end of that game. So, but granted, with the lack of depth at receiver, with the lack of depth in the secondary, they did as well as you could have expected against a team with the high firepower on the offense side of the ball as Minnesota. And Daniel Jones played a great game as well. So it's one of those rare times where losing, you still look good and you still look better than a lot of other teams, even though you lost, especially based on the circumstances of that loss. Which then has the opposite effect for the Chargers, who won and dropped down a spot, because boy, oh boy, did they do everything they could to lose that game against the lowly Colts. But the Colts are somehow so terrible that they wouldn't allow it to happen. But the Chargers should have definitely lost that game. There's no way they should have won that game. They played so bad. They couldn't get anything going. Herbert was just getting overwhelmed by the pass rush. He was throwing bad balls that were getting intercepted. There was turnovers all over the place. Like, the Chargers did everything they could to lose that game. And luckily they played that against one of the worst teams in the league. But against any other team, they would have probably lost that game, where it wouldn't have been a 20-3 final score. It would have been a lot closer too, a lot more of a nail biter towards the end. And here are my final 8. I moved the Ravens up 2 spots. They dropped down. Chargers dropped down. So moved them up at least 1, and then as I moved teams around there, like the Lions dropping down, also assisted in the Ravens moving up. 7-3, no movement. Everyone's sort of doing what they're supposed to do in those spots. And despite the fact that the Eagles played without Jalen Hurts, and even though I'm not necessarily punishing the Eagles for that loss to Dallas, because Dallas, again, is a good team, the 49ers are just undeniable now. And that's why they're my number 1 team. I wanted to do it last week. I was tempted, but I held out for it. And I just think the 49ers are a team that absolutely no one wants to play. They're not going to be able, it looks like, to get the first round bye. So they're going to be playing either the Giants, the Lions, the Commanders, the Seahawks, the Packers. It's going to be somebody in that range, because it looks like the Cowboys have locked up the 5 seed, so they're going to be playing whoever comes out of the NFC South. But man, oh man, the 49ers, every team, whether it's Dallas, Philly, Minnesota, those 3 teams are hoping whatever team gets San Francisco somehow flukes out a win in the first round so they can just avoid San Francisco altogether. Because they are built to beat everyone. Their offensive line is playing well. Their defense is unbelievable. Brock Purdy understands the system. His football IQ is so high, and it just works so well with what Kyle Shanahan calls offensively. It works so well with the other skill players on the field. His connection with George Kittle has been off the charts. He might be playing Garoppolo and Trey Lance into the unemployment line. At the very least, Trey Lance into a position where the 49ers might trade him away. Because, if you're getting this out of Brock Purdy, you could trade Trey Lance, and at this point, you can still probably get a second-round pick for him. Maybe a late first, depending on who you trade him to. So I think that's got to be strongly considered in this offseason by the 49ers. I think Garoppolo, I know they restructured so Garoppolo can stick around, but I think Garoppolo might end up being in the same situation he was coming into this year, where it's like, you're the backup, bro. You're the backup. Because we got a young stud here who's just absolutely destroying it. And think about how cheap the contract is, the cap hit is, on the last drafted player in the draft. That's the cap hit they're getting for this quality quarterback play that they're receiving. And big props to Kyle Shanahan, who I could see at this point winning Coach of the Year. I think you can throw in there Kevin O'Connell. I think Sirianni's obviously going to be involved in that. Dable's going to be involved in that. Campbell will be involved in that conversation if Detroit can make it into the playoffs, of course. But, man, Kyle Shanahan has to be strongly considered, and probably should be considered one of the favorites to win Coach of the Year at this point, just based on the scenario and the situation, the roster, and all the injuries that have happened, and all the movements that he's done to be able to accommodate these players. He's just unbelievable job. And they are, to me, the number 1 team in the entire league. And there you have it. 32 teams. My power rankings ranked last to first. Tell me what you think about where I ranked your team in these power rankings in the comment section below. And if you haven't already, please hit the like and the subscribe on this video. Easiest, quickest, freest way to support me. And I really appreciate it. Continue this growth for this channel. And I'll see you guys with the next video next time.